Before you scroll away, before you decide this is just another story about tragedy and survival, I need you to stay, because by the end of this, you might believe in miracles again. And if stories about hope rising from ashes move you even a little, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. You never know which story might change the way you see your own life. The night the plane fell from the sky, Daniel Harper was trying to convince his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, that burnt toast was just extra crispy. He had never been good at cooking, or braiding hair, or remembering picture day at school. But he tried. Ever since his wife, Emily, had passed away 2 years earlier after a sudden illness, Daniel had been both mother and father. He worked long shifts as a paramedic in a small Colorado town, then came home to bedtime stories and laundry he never quite folded properly. He was exhausted most days. But he kept going because Lily's laugh still sounded like Emily's. At 9:47 p.m., his radio crackled. Multiple emergency units respond. Possible aircraft down. Repeat. Aircraft down in the Northern Ridge area. Daniel froze. A plane crash. In their town. That almost never happened. He kissed Lily's forehead, told his neighbor Mrs. Klein he'd be late, and drove into the darkness with sirens wailing, heart pounding. The wreckage was worse than anything he had ever seen. Twisted metal scattered across the forest. Flames licking at broken wings. The logo on a torn fuselage panel read Boeing, though the rest of the aircraft was barely recognizable. Smoke thickened the air. First responders moved quickly, shouting coordinates, searching for survivors. Daniel had seen death before. He had held strangers' hands in their final moments. But something about a plane crash, families traveling together, children in window seats, honeymooners, business travelers, made it heavier. They were told there were no survivors. Still, Daniel searched. He climbed over shattered seats and broken trees, flashlight scanning through debris. That's when he heard it, a faint sound. Not a cry exactly, more like a breath fighting to exist. He followed it. Under a collapsed section of the cabin, shielded by a bent row of seats, was a woman. Barely conscious, blood matted in her dark hair. Her pulse weak but steady. Daniel dropped to his knees. I've got one survivor. She's alive. The team worked fast, lifting metal carefully, stabilizing her neck, loading her onto a stretcher. As Daniel rode with her in the ambulance, he kept talking, even though her eyes remained closed. Stay with me, he said softly. You're not alone. Her fingers twitched slightly around his glove. At the hospital, doctors rushed her into surgery. Internal bleeding, broken ribs, severe concussion. She was alive, but barely. Hours later, after the chaos settled, Daniel stood outside the ICU, staring at her through the glass. He didn't know her name. Didn't know her story. She was just one survivor among many losses. But something about the way she had been protected under those seats felt like fate had wrapped around her. The next day, the news confirmed it. Everyone else on board had died. She was the sole survivor. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. When she woke up 3 days later, confusion filled her eyes. She didn't remember the crash. She barely remembered boarding the plane. Trauma had stolen large pieces of her memory. Daniel happened to be on shift when she regained consciousness. He stepped into her room quietly. You found me, she whispered, her voice raspy. He nodded. You found us too. In the weeks that followed, Daniel checked on her during breaks. It wasn't professional obligation anymore, it was something else. He learned she had been traveling to surprise her sister for her birthday. She worked as a children's librarian in Seattle. She loved old novels and rainy afternoons. But her apartment was gone now, destroyed in a fire months earlier. Her sister had moved overseas. The crash had taken everything else. She had nowhere to go. When she was discharged, social services tried arranging temporary housing. But something in Daniel's chest tightened at the thought of her being alone. Just until you figure things out, he heard himself say. We have a guest room. It was impulsive, possibly reckless. But Lily surprised him. Is she the airplane lady? Lily asked wide-eyed. Yes. Then she can stay. Airplane ladies are brave. Sarah moved into their small house on Maple Street with a single suitcase provided by the hospital and scars still healing beneath bandages. At first, it was awkward. Daniel left early for shifts. Sarah moved slowly through recovery, attending physical therapy, battling nightmares that woke her shaking in the dark. Sometimes Daniel would find her sitting on the kitchen floor at 3 a.m., whispering apologies to ghosts only she could see. You survived, he would tell her gently. That's not something to apologize for. But survivor's guilt is a heavy thing. Meanwhile, Lily gravitated toward Sarah in a way that neither adult expected. Sarah read her stories in funny voices, helped with homework, taught her how to bake cookies without burning them. The house felt different, warmer. Daniel noticed laughter returning, not just Lily's, but his own. Still, fear lingered. He had loved once before, lost once before. Opening his heart again felt like tempting fate. One evening, months later, Sarah found Daniel sitting alone on the porch after a brutal shift. "I couldn't save a teenager today," he said quietly. "Car accident." She sat beside him. "You saved me." He swallowed hard. "I just did my job." "No," she said, looking at him with steady eyes. "You did more than that. You stayed." And that was the truth. He had stayed. Their bond deepened not through grand gestures, but through shared silences. Through grocery shopping debates. Through Lily's school recitals and late-night talks about fear and second chances. Sarah began volunteering at the local library once she regained strength. Slowly, fragments of her memory returned. The sound of the plane shaking. Oxygen masks dropping. A prayer whispered into darkness. But instead of breaking her, the memories sharpened her gratitude. A year after the crash, the town held a memorial near the ridge. Families of victims gathered, placing flowers among trees that had once burned. Sarah stood at the edge, trembling. Daniel took her hand. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Yes, I do," she replied. She stepped forward and spoke, not as a victim, but as a witness to survival. "I don't know why I lived," she said to the quiet crowd. "But I know what I choose to do with it. I choose to love harder. To show up. To be present. Because tomorrow is never guaranteed." When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the clearing. That night, back home, Lily tugged at Daniel's sleeve. "Are you going to marry Airplane Lady someday?" she asked innocently. Daniel laughed nervously, but when he looked at Sarah across the kitchen, something settled in his heart. Months later, under the same trees where tragedy once scarred the earth, Daniel knelt on one knee. "I found you in wreckage," he said, voice shaking. "But you rebuilt us." Sarah smiled through tears. "You were my miracle first." They married quietly, surrounded by friends, first responders, and townspeople who had witnessed their journey. Life wasn't perfect after that. Daniel still worked exhausting shifts. Sarah still battled occasional nightmares. Lily still burned toast sometimes. But their home pulsed with resilience. Years later, Sarah would tell library children about bravery, not as something loud and fearless, but as something gentle and persistent. Like choosing to love again after loss. Like a single dad opening his door to a stranger. Like a survivor daring to build a future. Daniel often thought back to that night in the wreckage, the smoke, the silence, the faint breath under broken metal. He had gone searching for survivors out of duty. He never expected to find his own healing there. Miracles don't always fall from the sky in perfect light. Sometimes they rise from ashes, broken but breathing. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even the darkest nights can carry unexpected blessings, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because somewhere out there, someone is standing in their own wreckage right now, and they need to believe that miracles are still possible.